Declare martial law, start killing these AHATs. Cop's Facebook makes chilling post. A cop is under scrutiny after allegedly making chilling comments on Facebook regarding the implementation of martial law and the murder of protesters. By Matt Agarist, September 25, 2017. Atlanta, Georgia. Cops and social media mix like oil and water. When they aren't arresting people for their Facebook posts critical of the government, police are taking to Facebook themselves to advocate for the death of people with whom they disagree. While these previous cases have been insidious, they pale in comparison to the recent alleged comments from a Georgia police officer's Facebook page in which he called for declaring martial law and the wholesale murder of protesters. Over the weekend, an Atlanta local news agency was sent several screenshots of a Facebook account belonging to Mercer University police officer, Mark Teams. As 11 Alive reports, a person using his image and name commented on a local news story shared to the station's Facebook page regarding the recent protest at Georgia Tech. The protest was related to the officer-involved shooting death of Scout Schultz, a student at the university. Students at Georgia Tech reacted in outrage last week after a video showed police gun down Schultz, whose attorney noted was armed with a pocket multi-tool. During the protests, some criminal elements began destroying property and a police cruiser was even set ablaze. Advertisement. While the destructive behavior of some of the protesters was certainly criminal and deserved police action, the response from Team's Facebook account was entirely over the top and grounds for criminal prosecution, as well as he was inciting violence. I'm sick of the BS. Declare martial law and start killing these asshats. Facebook. As if this wasn't bad enough, that same day, Team's Facebook account then shared a video from a page called Coalition for Trump Superstore, which showed violent police using water cannons on protesters, sending them tumbling down the street. The page uploaded it to advocate the use of water cannons on Antifa. Read more. 283 people have already been killed by police this year, setting record pace. While members of Antifa are certainly enacting and calling for violence, the people praising and calling for violence and the killing of protesters are no different. Ironically enough, the protesters being brutalized by cops in the video he shared were actually freedom fighters standing up to the tyrannical socialist regime's oppression in Venezuela. Facebook. This should be standard for every large city's police department, wrote Team's Facebook account in his video post. As 11 Alive reports, they reached out to Mark Teams via phone. Naturally, he denied making the posts and hung up on them. The man who answered said he worked for Mercer University as a police officer. When asked about his posts on social media, he repeatedly said, "I don't know what you are talking about." We asked him for his email address to send him the screenshots, but he refused. 11ALIVE News informed him that the university is aware of the comments and wanted to give him a chance to respond. Again he refused and hung up the phone. Despite Team's denial and playing ignorant, his Facebook page is still active and some of his public posts are in line with these alleged comments. In 2013, Teams made a post calling welfare recipients leeches and parasites. His disdain for who he perceives as the enemy is tellingly clear. Facebook. Again, in ironic fashion, however, Teams failed to realize that his entire paycheck is derived from the taxation of the public and police collecting revenue through the enforcement of victimless crimes. Arguably, the theft of someone's wages for their window tint being too dark can easily be compared to that of a leech or a parasite. Read more. Corporate media to U.S., Trump teasing Mika Brzezinski is worse than him killing children. When asked about their officers' conduct regarding these alleged posts made through the Facebook account, the department said they will handle it internally. This information has been passed along to Mercer's police chief, and the matter will be handled internally. While sharing memes is one thing, openly calling for martial law and the murder of people protesting their government is another, and it's criminal. If it is proven that Teams did, in fact, make these posts, which he more than likely did, he should be held to the same standards as everyone else who makes violent threats online. Somehow, we think that probably won't happen. However, If it does, we will keep you up to date.
Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I'd like to thank you for all your years of support through the years. As a result, this channel has grown and allowed me an equity partnership in carmarshal.com. Please take the time to check them out. They help you buy and sell your next car, even have a negotiating tool to save you from the hassle of haggling with multiple dealers. The link is in the description below. Please click and help support and give if you can too through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks again.